Hello, and welcome to the Wild Blue Podcast, perspectives on aviation lives, lifestyles, and business.
Hi, this is Chris Kirk at Wild Blue Aircraft Sales, and thank you so much for taking the time to subscribe to our podcast. This week, we are interviewing Roger Roberts, and Roger brings a lot to the table when it comes to experience, both inside and outside aviation. He just received the Wright Brothers Award, which means he has been actively flying for over 50 years, accident-free. Now, Roger is an F-33 Bonanza owner. Actually, we helped him acquire that airplane. It's probably been 4 or 5 years ago. And I came to know Roger when he and his aircraft partner in a Columbia 400 asked us to sell that airplane a number of years ago. Roger is a cardiologist in Wichita and just has a lot of good sound advice for the would-be aircraft owner, whether it's for a partnership, which he's been involved in, or just outright ownership, which he understandably enjoys more than a partnership. So in any case, here's my interview with Roger. Hope you enjoy. Today, I'm excited to have Roger Roberts. Roger, you're a cardiologist, correct?
Correct, yes.
I should say Dr. Roger Roberts. He's in Wichita, Kansas. And Roger is, he's not only a cardiologist, but he's a very experienced pilot and aircraft owner. So I thought it would be a great time for you to kind of share your experiences, not only in your business and professional life, Roger, but also aircraft ownership and, some of the lessons that you've learned there. So thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's just touch on that background. So you're a cardiologist. How'd you get into that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. My father was a family physician down in near Joplin, Missouri, in the hometown of Seneca, Missouri. And he was the Marcus Welby, if you remember that TV show. He was the town doctor. And I guess I decided to follow his footsteps. I went to the University of Missouri for undergrad and was really interested in becoming an astronaut, actually. At least that was my pipe dream. But as soon as I started the biology courses, I just kind of felt like I would be a little bit jealous of people who knew how my body worked and I didn't. So I decided I wanted to try for medical school and become a physician, which I did. And that's how I got started in that. Aviation was always really my primary passion, but it felt like as a vocation, medicine was the way to go. So I was happy to be able to combine both in my career, and it's worked out well.
We're probably going to have to cut this short right now because you went to Mizzou. I went to KU. I didn't know that ahead of time. I think this is over.
Well, I will tell you, my first wife, who passed away in 2010, was an avid KU alum, and so were her parents and everybody in her family. So sorry for the Missouri side there, guys, but to keep peace in the family, I became a KU fan. So
well, there you go.
So we're kind of good there.
Yeah. I live in Missouri, as it turns out, and even though I went to KU, I had a neighbor one time say, "Well, you're on the wrong side of the state line." I said, "Yeah, but I'm in the right state of mind." So
there you go.
That's what matters. Well, good. And so, are you still practicing?
Well, I'm really not doing clinical medicine. I do spend typically one night a week at our Kansas Heart Hospital, which is a heart-dedicated hospital here in Wichita. It's about a 52-bed facility, and I'll just give them night coverage once a week, just to kind of keep in touch with things. But I'm not doing any clinical medicine. I retired from doing interventional cardiology and clinical medicine in 2016. So the last 4 or 5 years, I've been out of doing that. but this covering at the hospital, I still get to see the nurses, and they say, "Oh, hi, Dr. Roberts, how are you doing?" I said, "Well, how are you?" And I kind of visit around and play with that, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. No, were you in practice for yourself, or were you part of a partnership, or how?
I was in a partnership, actually in two different partnerships in my career, but I was with Cardiovascular Consultants of Kansas the last 18 to 20 years of my fully practicing career. And we were a group of about 8 cardiologists that covered 3 hospitals, and all of our expertise was in interventional cardiology. So we're the guys that were sliding down the fireman's pole and running to the hospital and opening up blocked arteries with patients that had heart attacks, and then doing scheduled procedures which unblocked arteries, stenting of arteries, and things like that. Plus a whole myriad of clinical medicine, seeing patients. And a big part of that, Chris, was our outreach clinics. So we covered a lot of different small communities throughout Kansas, southeastern and southwestern Kansas. Each of us had their kind of own sector of places to go. And in my former practice, I'd established clinics, and I maintained that for my 36-year career. So, and most of that I was able to use by flying to some of these clinics. Not entirely, but weather permitting, I'd fly.
Yeah. So going down that road a little bit, you've been flying for how long?
Well, I've been flying since 1969, so
okay,
well over 51 years now.
And so what licenses and ratings do you have?
Well, I'm a private pilot. I have instrument rating. I've never tried my multi or commercial, although I've still think about advancing that just for just to do it. But
right.
I didn't require having that, obviously, so I didn't pursue that.
We've worked with a number of physicians over the years. Any of the other doctors that you worked with in your practice, especially, any of those guys fly?
Well, not in my practice, but let's see, there were one other pilot that was a cardiologist, Roger Evans, flew to a lot of clinics. And we had, in the first practice I was in, we had a couple of the commercial pilots that would fly typically at Barron to clinics. And then we added Bonanza, an A36, and that's where I got to fly that airplane in partnership with the group, and got to fly that for several years and over 600 hours in that Bonanza 770 Papa.
Oh, that's
before that, I was renting a Musketeer or a 152 or whatever was available to make those trips, just to be able to use flying to the clinics that we would go to.
A lot of people, when they get into an airplane ownership situation, they kind of have these dreams or these aspirations of being able to use the plane for business. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't.
In the first practice, it did. I mean, I had a 25% of the plane ownership, and 50% was with the major partner in the group, and another 25% was with one of my good friends. So that was really used for business, personal use as well. The second ownership that I had was a fabulous ownership with a gentleman here in Wichita, Rick Conklin, and we purchased a Columbia 400 in 2007, I believe. It was used as a demonstrator, had 88 hours on it, and that was a very sweet airplane. Just didn't have a lot of useful load, and it was high maintenance. And you're quite familiar with that airplane. You you helped in the sale of that. And that plane was actually ferried, I believe, to Paris, France, when we sold that in 2013, possibly. So I put about 400 hours in that airplane. So did my partner. And but that was a very unique partnership. I mean, Rick is a great guy, and we worked out schedule on who would have use of the airplane, and just it was a great partnership, which I think is not necessarily typical of a partnership in an airplane.
Right. But Rick wasn't a business partner of yours.
No, he was not.
Okay.
No, he was totally separate. Actually, the young gentleman that was showing the airplane, I think each of us independently had kind of been interested in that aircraft or of that type of an aircraft. And he put us together. We didn't know each other. And it was just kind of like a first date type of thing. And it worked out. And but as time moves on, that needs and change, and so we had to let that airplane go. And so that was 2014, and in 2017, with your help, I found 3389 Mike that ends F-33A, and that's a really good airplane.
Has it been 4 years already?
Yes, it had. Will be. It will be 4 years, believe it or not. And but it's kind of fun because the Columbia was a sexy plane. I mean, it had ramp appeal and it had the gull wings, and it was well-designed aircraft. And Cirrus had done much better with their manufacturing and all of that. And Columbia at that time was really undercapitalized, and Cessna bought it. They looked at our airplane quite a bit before they decided to buy that company. And but then we had the 2008 downturn, and their sales went down. And of course, as predicted, they moved their factory from Bend, Oregon to Independence, Kansas, and it just didn't do well for them. And they pulled the plug on it, a year and a half ago or so. Well, before COVID, for sure. And but it was a nice airplane. It was basically a 2-passenger airplane. You could take 3 people, you could take 4 people. Just couldn't put much fuel in it. But it was a side stick, and it was very intuitive. It was a fully stick, where Cirrus is kind of a half of a yoke mounted on the side. And it didn't have the ballistic parachute in it, but it was well structured. And they had a great organization of teaching, and the factory was clean. I mean, the people there were they really were proud of their product. But when they got bought out, things changed, and the downturn made a big difference too. So it's unfortunate. It's a nice airplane, but it was fun coming back to a Bonanza. It's kind of like coming back to your hometown, which it literally is. That airplane was made right here, and the American Bonanza Society, I just simply can't say enough about what they do with Hickman and Tom Turner. It's a great organization, and it's really amazing because you look through the magazines, the new membership every month takes up a full page.
That whole page, the whole page.
It blows me away. Of course, they're not making that many new Bonanzas, and all these are mostly legacy airplanes, and they've just done really a good job with it on educating. It's kind of fun flying something that was designed back in 47. Yes, it's old technology, but it works. And it's just kind of like a DC-3. It just keeps going.
Yeah. That's a great comment about ABS. And they do, I think that they are kind of the example for other owner groups to aspire to. And I recommend even to people, if you're not a Bonanza owner, you don't own a Beach product, but you are an airplane owner, subscribe to ABS and become an ABS member, because there's so much stuff in there that is going to be applicable to whatever airplane you own. But there's a lot of other stuff in there that if you read it, you can kind of develop some questions on your own to go investigate those issues or those items in your own airplane.
Right.
But any group out there that thinks that they are as good as ABS and especially with those two gentlemen that you mentioned do, I would beg to differ. But it's really it's such a valuable organization. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's kind of nice because they moved their office from what was Mid-Continent, now Eisenhower, the downtown, the big airport, out east, right across the street from Jabara, and they literally are across the street from the Kansas Heart Hospital, which is where
there you go,
where I worked and where I still go and do that one night a week thing. So sometimes I'll walk over there in my scrubs and kind of shake hands and say hello. But it's a great organization. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Let me go back to your first airplane, though, 'cause you mentioned it, but what was your first airplane?
Well, first airplane was a 770 Papa. It was an A36. I think it was a 76, 1976 model year. And of course, we bought it used. We bought it in 1987, and we flew the pants off of it, so to speak. It was flying several times a week. If I wasn't flying it, then one of the corporate pilots was flying it on as a second airplane. So a lot of times we would have doctors going out to clinics, 2 or 3 at a time. So if they weren't driving and they could fly, that they would take one of the airplanes. The pilots, Jackie Luke was one of the pilots, and she's a great person. Actually, she's one of the people that wrote a letter of recommendation for the Wright Brothers award that I received recently, and she's just a great individual. But they would let me one of her what became the person that became her husband, Neil Souter, and actually it's Jackie Souter, I guess I should say, was a CFII, and he let me fly the Baron, which was kind of sweet, and kind of give me some instruction in the twin on a few of the clinics that we would go to. So that was kind of, but anyway, the 770 Papa was an A36, and I flew it. At that time, I had a place in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and kind of learned by just experience a little bit about mountain flying and how to set a non-turbo charged normally aspirated engine at high altitudes, and flying in Angel Fire, which probably doesn't have some of the best records of aircraft safety, and making the hops from there over to Taos, which is kind of a crazy thing to do, but because we had an automobile, but sometimes we make that hop over to Taos or down to Santa Fe. And I found learned a good lesson there by listening to the locals, because at Angel Fire, you always take off to the north, simply because of that's where the valley opens up and the valley closes down going to the south. So unless there's a horrible tailwind, you want to take off to the north, and you have to spiral up until you get enough altitude, about 12 or 13,000 feet to shoot over the peak. And the eastern slope there on the mountains, I don't know if you've been in Angel Fire at all.
Never have.
It's actually, it's kind of flat on the top. I mean, it's not mountainous. It is a mountain range, but that's where the ski slopes are, and it's relatively flat on top, so you can fly across and look for it. And there's a good place to put it down. You have to put it down, and then as soon as you clear that, it's at Cimarron. It's all flat all the way back home. Kansas. It's just, very dramatic, the eastern slope of the Rockies.
Yeah.
So,
the airplane that you own now, the F-33, that is the first airplane that you've owned entirely without a partner, right?
That's exactly right.
How's that working out? How do you like that?
Well, I don't have too many arguments with my partner on that one. And I tell you what's nice about it is when you put it away, it's the same way when you go back to the hangar. And like I said, I had a great partner with Rick, but when somebody else operates the airplane, you never absolutely know. So you just have to start. I'm pretty anal. I just have to start from scratch on, checking everything.
Right.
Not that I don't do that anyway and do it now, but at least I have assurance that somebody hasn't dinged this or dinged that, or
can't get mad at anybody but yourself either.
That's right.
Yeah. Every now and then I'll float that balloon with my wife about a partner and just to kind of test how serious she is about having the airplane. She loves it. And I threw that out again the other day, and she's like, no. She goes, I don't want to have a partner. I don't want to get in there and clean up their mess.
Yeah.
And anything else, but we've been down that road before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, with Rick and I, we kind of had a rule that nothing more than water in the airplane.
Yeah.
No food, no soft drinks. Let's keep it clean, and we did. So that's why I said he was a great partner. I mean, I just can't say enough about Rick. So
yeah,
and a great person as well. But it is nice to have that complete ownership and trying to work out holidays and there was always times that I'd take the airplane and say, oh, gee, did I let Dave, or Dave was my non-position owner in the first Bonanza, or with Rick, we pretty much say, are you flying it? It's your weekend. No, I'm not. So, well, can I take it? Your first right of refusal? Sure, go ahead and take it. We're not planning on doing anything. So that give and take is important. And having that, it's like a marriage, obviously, but it is nice to have it yourself. I mean, it's like, I guess, not sharing your spouse with somebody.
That's exactly right. Let's see here. There's going to be people that are listening to this that either financially or just because they want to have a partner, they're going to be in a partnership situation. So throw out some of your words of advice. I mean, you've been in this a couple different times. You've seen both sides of it. What worked for you guys and what didn't work is in terms of, owning an airplane with somebody else?
Well, I guess as far as the maintenance and the upkeep, when I was in the practice with the shared ownership of the airplane, the corporate pilots took care of all that. I mean, I really wasn't involved with getting the annual scheduled and some of the squawks. I mean, I would know about them, but I wasn't involved with the maintenance of it. So I missed out on that. I was too busy. I didn't have time to do that. I mean, we were running and gunning most of the time anyway. So that was an unfortunate thing. On the Columbia, Rick pretty much handled the updates for the Garmin system. And I just let him do that again. I was still busy in practice. And we scheduled the annuals together on a convenient time. And we had those done from various places, trying to find the best place for the best price. But with the F-33A, the Bonanza, it's all my deal. And so, in fact, next month is going to be, it's due for its annual next month. And I plan to be there now that I'm retired and can do that. I'm going to be there a lot of the time when we got the airplane torn down and look at things. In fact, we just did, that's another thing that the ABS does for Bonanza owners, just did a service clinic here in Wichita. And, that was a minimal cost. And it's an hour and a half long. And the Bonanza mechanic, they're Bonanza approved, that run these clinics. You get down on your hands and knees and you crawl into the airplane and you're looking in this, you're looking at the landing gear, they got jacked up, they're looking for the clearance flappers, they borescope the engine. I got to look to the borescope and see what we're looking for. I learned really more, in 51 years of aviation. I always thought compression checks were very important and really told you about how your piston is working and really what the Continental mechanic was. There's a Continental mechanic and there's an ABS mechanic that goes through all this with you. So we got a two-step thing. And really the compression check is a leak test. It's saying what kind of leakage, and 60 or 80 is perfectly good. And I always thought it had to be up in the 70s or
right.
The knowledge of that was really good. But anyway, being personally involved with the airplane and the mechanics of it is really valuable. I did upgrade. I think you probably knew this, but I did take out all of the vacuum system out, and that was 3 years ago now, and put in a Garmin 500 TXI and a GTN 750 and then the transponder something is 375 Garmin, and so now I do the updates and all that, which aren't that hard, but with the Columbia, I let Rick do all that. So it really gets you into the game and continuously learning about how these airplanes work, and all the confusion or misinformation there is about how to operate your engine. And everybody has, guys from Continental have their set opinions, and other Bonanza operators say, well, it's really not that important. For example, Lena Peak, you should be 65% power, according to the Continental guys. And the reality is that's about 23 inches, I think, manifold pressure. And if you're above 6,000 feet, you're at 23 or 22.6 anyway. So you're already operating at 65% power. If you're Lena Peak, that's a sweet spot for it. So things like that just keep cropping up. And another thing about the American Bonanza Society, once a month they do a webinar, and they'll have a speaker talk, or Tom Turner does that, which he's very capable of doing, and just educational things. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's really a good point there. That we just Todd and I did a podcast here not too long ago on determining or developing a mentor especially as an aircraft owner, because there is so much misinformation out there. It's one of my big bones of contention with the internet. People are, they'll get on these Facebook pages and they'll listen to 15 different people, all of whom are spouting a different philosophy or a different technique. Some of them are on there just to be seen, and there's the others that just can't avoid the snarky comments. Yes. And you don't get, down into really what is important when it comes to the operation of your airplane. And ABS and other organizations like that, they filter out a lot of that crap, for lack of a better word, and really, they are kind of your mentor in so many instances. And so I'm always trying to caution people like that, because I don't know if it's a sign of the times. People can't make up their own minds or can't make a decision, but they'll throw out there, well, what do you think about XYZ? And I'm always like, why do you care what somebody you don't even know, who you don't even know what their background or experience is? Why do you care what they think about XYZ? Find somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and who has some experience. So that's a really good point. You touched on something a minute ago. I want to make sure we cover this. So the Wright Brothers Mastery Award, tell us about that.
Well, I really wasn't that familiar with it until a couple years ago, I guess. I just had seen somebody that had received that. And so, well, one of the requirements is you must have I think actually you have to have you have to have your license, but I think it's the time of your solo, 50 years. And I started doing the math. Said, well, I'm getting right there at 50 years. I did my solo and in July of 1969, just about the time we landed on the moon, actually. And so I got to thinking about that, but kind of dismissed. I said, oh, gee, that's for people that have really done something big in aviation. I mean, like, there have been flight instructors all their life, or they're like Chris Kirk, who flies for like Delta, isn't it right?
Yeah.
And, people that have had a profession out of aviation. But the more I research that's really not the case. You just need to have a pilot certificate, 50 years of flying, and no major goof ups. And knock on wood, I haven't had any major goof ups. And, it's kind of interesting because it's debatable. I mean, you can have certain events, types of accidents or whatever, and still qualify for that. You just can't be really too egregious on your conflict with the FAA. But I got to checking on that, and in fact, I was telling my wife Christy about that. She said, "Oh, that's are you really wanting to do that?" I said, "Well, actually, I think I kind of am, because flying was something I was interested in doing ever since I could remember." And so I got to checking. I asked a couple of the guys at the airport. I had my plane at Stearman Field here on the east side of Wichita. It's actually in Benton, Kansas, about 15 minutes from the house.
Great airport.
Yep. And they have, the restaurant there, and it's a good flying place to have that $100 whatever. And so I got to asking. He said, "Yeah, I've got, the older guys flying, he flew an AT-6 there and would buzz around, and so yeah, I did that, and said, no, it's for this, and it's, anybody can do that." So I started applying, and I went through this whole process during COVID, and it's quite an interesting process. But you need 3 letters of recommendation, and you need to write a little narrative about your flying experience and how you used aviation in career or personal life or whatever. And I think they just do a background check, and if everything seems appropriate. So finally I received that. It took about probably a good 4 months, maybe 5 months. And again, that was during COVID, and spoke with the fellow at our FSDO office here, which is the only one in Kansas, here in Eisenhower Airport. And he actually told me he hasn't even been to the office in almost those 12 months.
Right.
So he said, the paper, I kept texting, well, when am I going to receive this? You said it'd be 90 days, and here we are 4 months or 5 months. And I said, I'm just kind of curious. And he sent me this link to get a plaque made. I still haven't received the official letter from the FAA, and it's been 3 months ago, and since it was issued. And he said, well, it's probably on a stack of paper about 3 feet high in the office. But he said, it's just a sheet of paper. He said, you've got the award. So I do have the award, and I have it here behind me. And it does mean a lot to me. Looking at my wall over here, I've got my diplomas and all of the sometimes the nonsense that we acquire in our profession. but that award probably means as much to me as about anything else that I have anywhere else, simply because it's something that I love to do. And so being able to combine that passion with my vocation, which is another passion, is a pretty sweet deal. I grew up, um, like I said, in a small town of Seneca, Missouri, south of Joplin, literally on the state line of Oklahoma. And my dad was a family physician, but he had a lot of interesting hobbies. And one of the hobbies that I can remember to my earliest memory was building model airplanes. And back then there were the U-line controls. So we had the two lines.
Oh, sure.
Connected to the airplane, the model, and building model airplanes, the smell of that dope in the upstairs, work area. And so I'd take scrap balsa wood and I'd make my own models. And I learned about dihedral. I learned about the dihedral wing. I learned about, how you build an airplane, what makes it fly, how the elevators work, how the rudder works. And, back then for those type of airplanes, you always put a little bit of right rudder in the airplane to keep it pulling out away from you as you turn this in a circle. And so my dad never became a pilot, but he had several hours flying model airplanes. And later in life, he got into the radio control.
Yeah.
Then my brother, who passed away a few years ago now, was 10 years older than I am, and he was career Air Force. And he flew ultimately C-141s, and he was in the MAC part of the Air Force, and then flew C-5s, C-5A Galaxies. And I flew an OV-10 in 1970 in Vietnam, which is a forward air control, so he was a fat pilot. And he had some interesting stories of aviation. So my brother went in the Air Force in 1960, and back then he went in 2 years of college and then got his officer candidate school. And then in 1967, which is the year I graduated from high school, he was able to became a navigator first. And then in 67, he applied and got into pilot training. So he went to pilot training at Vance Air Force Base in Union, Oklahoma. And so anyway, those were circumstances that just added to my passion already. And so I, 2 years later, in 1969, I already soloed. So
wow.
I got my license in between, I think, freshman and sophomore year of college. So that was a passion for me. And just one other thing about my brother, who was kind of my idol at that time, obviously. And he, in 1978, with the C-5A, they had a special mission of flying into Zaire. That was during when they were having a civil war. And so they were flying in to get refugees out. And they had a nonstop mission and set some records in doing this mission. And actually, his crew, he and his crew, won the McKay Trophy Award.
Okay.
I'm not sure a lot of people will know about that, but it was presented to him at, I think we were at the Smithsonian. I was there for the award, and it was a big deal. I mean, that award goes back to the 20s, and there's a couple people that, everybody would recognize. One of them, Eddie Rickenbacker, had won that award, and so had Jimmy Doodle. So it's a very prestigious award. So I was very proud of him for doing that. So those are all reasons why I wanted to get into aviation.
Right.
I was asked, I took the Air Force exams when I was in college and didn't think much about it, and got into medical school and was already in my first year. And I got this call in it would have been 71, saying, "Would you like to fly in the Air Force?" Well, I said, "Well, thank you, but I'm already in medical school." And at this point, I'm already wearing glasses, and I knew I wouldn't be able to be a pilot. And so I declined doing that at that time. But I knew, my career path was best being a physician and then flying for personal use or business use, I guess.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, this is very interesting. So let me ask you this: what's next for you, either professionally, flying wise, as an airplane owner? What's on the horizon?
Well, that's a very interesting question. As we age, I'm now going through the process of special issuance of medical. So, people listening, you really have to pay attention to that. Being a physician and being in good health, I never really felt like that would be much of a problem for me. I had patients that were pilots, and especially if they had heart disease and they had to get routine checks, and oftentimes we'd end up doing that for the AME to get that done. But as we all age, I developed an intermittent irregular heartbeat of atrial fibrillation. It's not chronic. I don't have it all the time. I just have it periodically. But much to my surprise, even as being a cardiologist, the FAA thinks that's a really big deal. And it really isn't that big of a deal, but it could be. But I guess because I know what I know, and I know how to treat that or how to observe it, it's kind of like a bread and butter thing for a cardiologist to see. So many people have atrial fibrillation, whether it's chronic or whether it's intermittent. And but the FAA really puts the brakes on everything for you if that's recorded. So it takes a while. It takes a good almost 3 months to get that. So as an aircraft owner, when this occurred last year, I was down for 3 months, not flying the airplane, and you have to go through this every year, and so it's a timing thing as well. So if you wait till your medical is due, and I've had the third class medical, I haven't gone to the basic med yet, but if you have a third class, you have to have that every 2 years, of course, but with the special issuance, you have to have that monitored yearly. And the problem is, if you wait till your third class is due, then you get into this hole of waiting for about up to maybe 2 months of submitting all the information and getting it back before they'll reissue your medical. So I'm not an AME. I don't research, but I'm learning a lot more about that. So you have to stay ahead of the game for all you folks out there that are getting a little older, because you're bound to have something happen, whether it's hypertension, whether it's irregular heartbeat, or anything that puts a need for you getting a waiver or a special issuance. So,
right.
I think the best thing to do is develop a really good relationship with your AME and talk to them about what you need to talk to them about, and also seek some counseling on the timing. I mean, there's a fine line between being compliant and doing what the FAA wants and maybe what's prudent to do at the time.
Right.
And I think you're probably well aware of that, being a professional commercial pilot. you want to disclose everything, but you may not want to disclose it at the inappropriate times.
Yes.
In order to make things work.
Yeah, that's really good sage advice. It kind of goes along that mentor theme we were talking about earlier. And, I've been down that road myself. Back when I was 29, I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I had to go through a lot of that stuff. And so I really found out then, it's been, how long has that been? 25 years ago, how important it is. You got somebody that's really there acting on your behalf. Because I hear the horror stories from so many people otherwise, and they're talking to 50 different people and nothing's going to happen. You've got to have somebody that actually knows what they're doing that can help you down that road. So,
right. And that's not being illegal. I mean, but if you mention it to the FAA, then they have to, it's just an algorithm. They automatically, you get told you need to have this and this and that done, when it may not really be appropriate on the medical side of things to do that. So you're dealing with the bureaucracy versus the actual medical need. And that's the dance that you have to do.
Yeah. Well, Roger, thank you. This has been very enlightening, and I think we could probably go on for another hour or so just visiting and hearing more of your story. But I really appreciate you taking the time to share all that. And for those of you listening, this will be posted. The video portion will be posted on our YouTube channel. And so you just Google Wild Blue Aircraft Sales and look at you can find the YouTube channel from there, and it'll be posted on there as well. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time with us.
Well, yeah. And thank you, Chris. Like I've told you before, I really appreciated your help in vetting this airplane and for others that I thought of in before this airplane became available. And I've seen a few of your interviews and all the stuff that you do on Instagram and I guess YouTube and wherever else. And I think it's pretty remarkable. So.
Well, thank you. I wish I could take credit for it, but we got some folks here behind the scenes that take care of all that stuff, so that are a lot more savvy at it than I am. I'm just, as I tell Tabby, my assistant, I'm like, yeah, I'm just the pretty face here, and then she laughs and make some derogatory remark about that. But no, again.
Well, hopefully I'll see you at Oshkosh.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Blue Podcast. Find us online at flywildblue.com. And don't forget to subscribe and share.